Hey everybody, good evening. I just want to jump on here really quick before I play this and let you know that I just did a latest update with Sergeant William Kotel, and he is a retired Army sergeant, intelligence officer, and worked in the theater of the Middle East at the time of Benghazi. We've done several interviews. You can find those on the YouTube channel on Making Life Brighter and also on Voice America on the archives on Making Life Brighter there. So without further ado, I want to play this for you because you can hear I don't have much of a voice. And here you go. 1, 2, you're
Got it.
good evening. You're watching Making Life Brighter, and I'm your host, Winifred Adams. And tonight we have return special guest, retired Army Sergeant William G. Kotel. And he was in Intel. He worked for CENTCOM, and we've done several interviews and things. And tonight we have a special update. We also have some technological interesting issues that we're lucky we got this far. So bear with us as we are stacked here to speak back and forth. And Sergeant Kotel, thank you for returning and being with us tonight. Thanks for being here with us on Making Life Brighter. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
I'd like to begin by drawing everyone's attention to some information. Back in 2019 and 2020, I was talking about the ways of the world at that point in time. And when I first interviewed Sergeant Kotel, he led me on to an interview with General Vallely. And in the interview I did with General Vallely, which is on the YouTube channel, and you can see it there in the archives, he spoke about the imminent danger at that time of Iran satellites having nuclear weaponry on those satellites. And I want to draw your attention to that again, and maybe go back and take a look at that interview as well as the other interviews I did at the time with Sergeant Kotel. We've been chronicling some things that had been coming along, and every single time, as I said before, Sergeant Kotel is ahead of the curve, and he's always been the person that is championing the change, whether they acknowledge him or not. And so he has some special intel updates for us tonight, and a discussion that's going to open wider than even the last update. So many of you told me that you really appreciated that and that you liked that information. We have some more from him tonight, but I definitely want you to go back to the archives and listen to some of the previous interviews we've done. And it might be listed under the Winifred Adams Show in Making Life Brighter. You can also go through all the Making Life Brighter videos. It's there. So the one I'm talking about is with General Vallely. And we've come a long way since 2019. And I remember the very day that I spoke to you, Sergeant Kotel, and you told me something's coming down the pike and you've got so many hours before it hits. And that was the big pandemic. So every time you've been ahead of the curve, and I'd like to start this conversation off with the issue that we're having with your mandamus that you filed, is that they didn't acknowledge it, and we've talked about that several times here. But you've been a champion of asking people to come forward, and in coming forward to please kind of band together and make as loud a voice as possible, and to come into your representatives and basically tell them in no uncertain terms that these things are not being handled. So let's start out with some of the points that you have here, and that we know you've been talking about Maduro in Venezuela and the threat that we have with the people coming over the border and who those people are, what they're doing here, and what he's doing essentially in South America today. So we know that Maduro has made an alliance with Silva de Lulu of Brazil, and you consider him a corrupt president. And so tell us what's been happening regarding Brazilians that have been sent to Venezuela and so on.
Well, first off, thank you for the introduction. Second, I want to apologize in advance because I have a raspy voice, a sore throat. I apologize about that, but the combination of allergies and other, protagonists, so to speak, are a little bit daunting. So if I do cough a little bit and all, I apologize ahead of time.
It's all right. We've all got it.
I know.
It's like a hit for the team, right?
Oh yeah. But if you recall my mandamus, it was to have the United States government conduct a police action against Venezuela, in particular Maduro and his League of Bad Guys. That was a simplistic way of doing it, where there's no war, no conflict, but a police action with a coalition to go down and remove a murderous, crimes against humanity kind of individual, and that also his actions have influenced what's taking place in the southern hemisphere and the central hemisphere of the Americas. And just to speak a little bit on that dynamic, the last discussion we had, which was post the mandamus regarding Brazil and Silva de Lulu being corrupt and working with Maduro, has now expanded exponentially. Just to kind of highlight how that goes, right now Venezuela is planning on, invading a little country called Guyana. Now that invasion is being reputed by the United States, saying, hey, don't do that. But again, those are just hollow words, because Venezuela has allied itself with Russia, China, and Iran. That's become a real problem. And as far as Brazil goes, the parliament moved to put troops on the border to also protect Guyana. But the president, who was unlawfully put back into power by forces of Venezuela, have tried to pull those troops back. And that's created another problem down in that region of the world. But to just touch really quick on one thing, as I stated, when Maduro in 2017 did his dirty deeds by having death squads and killing many and processing their bodies through plants so they would be hidden from UN's crimes commissions, he created a 7.1 million refugee crisis that was all starting out in Colombia. Well, the Colombian government buckled under this, pressure, and those migrants started moving north, and they started getting up to Central America and to the United States. And meanwhile, every country along the way was putting its undesirables and others in that mix. And then somewhere along the line between Nicaragua and Mexico, you have a whole new group of migrants, which were Chinese nationals, Russian nationals, Haitians, Central and Northern Africans, a lot of Muslims and Arabs just mixed in there. And it's really curious because most of them, 9 out of 10 are male-aged, military-age type folks. So this really has created a huge crisis and a problem. So what I did is I kind of put together some bullet points to kind of expand your mind on what this means as far as the dynamic of South and Central America changing. So we speak a little bit about the invasion of Guyana, and then we can speak to election fraud. Elections were held in Brazil. Well, Silva de Lulu got Maduro to go ahead and send a ton of Venezuelans down to Brazil to aid in the elections, to put him back into office. And then he reciprocated and put a bunch back into Venezuela. But he still lost his presidential re-election race against Maria Machado. Machado, he totally devalidated the entire election process, said that she had cheated and that she was a threat, and put out orders to try to have her arrested, which were rescinded shortly after because they were worried about making her a martyr. But she lawfully won the election, and he's not stepping down at all. This again goes back to the United Nations and its inept actions and ineptness, period, and the United States' failure to maintain relations, good relations with South and Central America. Well, other things started taking place. Ecuador was going through a food and fuel shortage. Since 2019, it's steadily been getting worse. Now, Ecuador is a country that is aligned with Venezuela and has a leftist, which is a communist party government. And they're cracking down on civilians in a manner similar to what Maduro is doing. That's pretty dangerous if you want to know the truth. And Venezuela is supporting those operations. Colombia has a new president that's been in for over a year now, President Gustavo, right? He's aligned himself with Venezuela. They are now allies, and they're trading partners and more. Colombia used to be a very staunch U.S. supporter. Now they're not. Now they're supporting Venezuela. That's extremely dangerous. Nicaragua, for the last 2 years, they've been supporting Maduro. They still have 222 Catholics they arrested, to include a Catholic bishop, in jails because they simply refuse to stop practicing in certain areas their religion and helping the poor. This is a damning thing. And I go back to what I said in my previous interview. Where is the Vatican? Where's the Pope to come back and say, hey, this is a bad guy, we need to remove him? Nothing. I mean, I literally wrote like letters and emails to archbishops, cardinals, and to the Vatican itself. And I've never gotten a response. Matter of fact, all I got was a chain email from one of the bishop's offices telling me when Mass is going to be served on Sundays in New York. So I thought that was a little odd. But
that is odd. And you know, there's a fella I actually can put you in touch with. I haven't released his interview yet. He wrote a book, and he's a pastor that seems to be making waves in the Vatican. So I can have you appeal to him to take it there, and we'll do that after the show. But go ahead.
Well, just to get a little off base for 1 second, another thing I complained about in my last interview was the fact the Pope never stood up and said how bad Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran were for doing what they did to Israel. And they still have not done so. As a matter of fact, the Pope was on the phone the entire time with the country of Iran. I found that to be very disheartening. But anyways, that's a different story. Let me get back to what I was speaking about. So anyways, as I said, the dynamic of Central and South America has changed to the point where we get to modern day. So let's talk about Russia. Russia has been selling Maduro military aircraft and military equipment for a while. Now, Russia has placed 12 strategic bombers in the country of Venezuela. Now, a strategic bomber is one that carries nuclear arsenal, and they're meant to go around the world. You know, that's a very scary message in and of itself. This is extremely bad news, you know, and the pressure that the Venezuelans and other countries that support Venezuela now are putting on other countries that do not support them. Those countries are starting to falter because, again, United Nations, and especially the United States, is not involved with assisting these countries like we used to. You know, they're out of control. They're corrupt. Their governments are bad. They're having election influencing, and then they're cracking down on civilians. And when riot control doesn't work, then they're killing civilians. You know, this is not indicative of a modern day society of, you know, doing the right thing.
They're not going to either. It's corrupt all the way through the UN.
So Russia's influence on Cuba, let's get to that. So Russia supposedly has has tactical nuclear weapons inside of Cuba. And they have a ton of advisors going to Cuba now. And again, this is another scary event because Cuba's 90 miles off the coast of Miami. This is not a good, you know, look for that country. And this is also a very scary situation when you think about it. But Russia has recently, as of 2 days ago, well, actually it was last week they started, but 2 days ago it was reported Russia has been recruiting soldiers from countries like Venezuela and Cuba to go over to Ukraine to fight for them. And of course, Maduro and the Cuban government is happily supplying bodies, you know, people to go over there and fight, which again, another real problem there. I mean, there's open recruitment and it's publicized actually, if you want to know the truth, on radios and everything. So this has become another masterminded, wonderful piece. And then if we go into a little bit more about Venezuela, some of the other countries, China has a huge influence, along with Iran and Venezuela. They're not only supplying Maduro with weapons and equipment and fighter aircraft and even some gunboats, but they're also supplying other material supplies. I'll just leave it at other. And then we go back into a little bit of China, what they're doing, because they're openly threatening the Philippines now, as well as trying to take over a lot of islands in the Pacific. And they've already begun infiltrations of large amounts of Chinese immigrants through our southern border in Texas and from Mexico, as well as California and New Mexico and Arizona. Here's the countermand. Mexican government is trying to do relations with Maduro, I think, to appease him. But in Mexico, the drug cartels, of all people, have stood up and said that they can't handle these immigrants anymore, especially from Honduras, and that they are threatening these immigrants, and they've started killing these immigrants because they're threatening to burn down cities in Mexico, that they don't want the Mexican food, clothing, or any of that stuff. And I think the government in Mexico has, put up with enough, and the United States is not involved, nor is the UN. So they can't really do any negative actions. There might be a deal between the Mexican government and the cartels. But the cartels are not the people we should be relying on to stop mass migration flows from other countries throwing out their undesirables, as well as Russian, Chinese, Haitian, African immigrants, Arab immigrants. I mean, that's not, everyone's duty. I don't know why Mexico and the United States didn't work a deal out where they stopped them south of Mexico, but they didn't.
No,
so you have a
I
huge
don't think they're going to.
shift.
But so you're saying basically that the cartels are coming, that they're doing the dirty work of the country. So the country's relying on the cartels to do the dirty work. And so specifically, what is that dirty work?
I'm not saying that they are 100%, but I'm telling you that's what it appears to be, especially from some of the news reports of bodies turning up. And the intent behind that is to allow the cartels to do the country's work that it can't do publicly around the world because it can't be seen as murderers. And that's not, to be honest with you, a lot of that's not murdering, because a lot of these migrants are coming up with weapons, but that's another story in and of itself. And then there's two other issues that really shape the dynamic of South and Central America. And that's that Maduro has openly threatened Israel, has gone ahead and said, I support the idea, or I support the Hamas, I support Hezbollah, I support Iran. The Iranians are in Venezuela, but Venezuela is also shipping weapons to, Hamas, which I find a little odd, because they're buying weapons from Russia and China and Iran, and then they're sending it over there, which makes little to no sense. But that is Maduro's claim. That's what he stated openly, and he's continued to state that. He's even talked about sending soldiers over to help fight against the IDF, which, again, was verbal threats, but you never know with that guy. And then the last dynamic that's pretty damaging. Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the last dynamic that's kind of pretty damaging to a lot of things is in Russia, there was an election that was held back in 2013, and it was an Alexei Navalny. Now, Alexei Navalny is a Russian, and he's married to a Ukrainian wife, right? Well, Putin had him put in jail because of his political beliefs, and he kind of languished in and out of jail since 2013 till present day. As of 2 days ago, he wound up being healthy as an ox, but he wound up being dead in the prison. And this is sad for his family, and I mourn for them. But at the same time, this also is a martyr. Inside the country of Russia, since the war in Ukraine began, there has been a lot of sabotaging going on throughout the country. You don't hear about it because they close the news lid. However, these are not Ukrainian spies or U.S. spies doing this. These are regular Russians, and they're doing it because their sons and daughters and husbands and wives are going to war and getting killed in Ukraine for no good reason, in their opinion. Putin is driving this mad train, but now he's killed this gentleman, Mr. Navalny, in jail, and this was his political rival, and he's made an absolute martyr out of him. So the silver lining in this horrific event is that possibly there will be a hell of an uprising in Russia. And as I stated before, Russia does need to watch its back door, because China is sitting there foaming at the bit, and they might be trying to do just what the Nazis did to the Russians in World War II. Hey, I'm your buddy, and then turn around and attack them. There's a good potential of that. But at the same time, we're really focused on South and Central America. I find it odd that no Latin American network at all will pick up any news about the mandamus, about what's going on down there, and reporting it to the American people or to those in the Spanish culture down in South and Central America. I mean, we had a discussion the other day. You said it might have been a fear factor. It's possible, but I think that enough countries down there have done enough damage to their own people and have put so much pressure on the ones that haven't caved in yet, like Mexico is one of them, that there really is an issue and a need for an outcry. And then,
yeah, well,
lastly,
the entire Latin American culture needs to get involved, and
they do.
they don't have a voice. They have entertainment, but they don't have a voice.
Well, they do.
Well, they
And
have a
then there's
voice, but
last,
their voice isn't being showcased over a bigger narrative. So that voice, the true voice of the Latino community, needs to be heard.
well,
It's
think
not.
about it like this. You told me yourself there was a guy that ran for political office in California. He's an artist by trade or whatever. And obviously he's not what he says he was. He obviously is another worker bee for Maduro. I find this really odd because there's so many people in the United States and in other countries around the world that are from South and Central America that have a voice and are in protected countries that can speak out, and they are still not. It's
Right?
an oddball event.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, there's a sidebar note to some of the stuff going on in South and Central America. In the country of Chile, there's a lot of issues about water rights, and apparently they have different laws about who can own water, who can dam up a stream supply and cut off certain farmers. Well, big companies for the last 2 or 3 years have been trying to buy up these water rights so they could dam it up and do it for their own crops and push out a lot of little farmers. And recently, as of last week, there was a mass fire. The fire has all the hallmarks of the Hawaii fire, which was, initiated, in my opinion, by an airborne platform laser, which means that it's flown on a plane and somebody shot it down there to help instigate fires. That would be a private company. That's not a government doing that, so you can't go accusing any government of it. But it is a way that they can create an issue to destroy people's homes and livelihoods in those areas, push them out that way. And I find that to be odd because Chile's like right smack in the middle, right next to Venezuela and all. And I think this is another event that needs to be investigated and looked into to see if those poor farmers and those villagers had been pushed out unlawfully by a company or corporation. And rumor has it, it was a Brazilian-backed company, but I can't confirm that. So again, that's why I said rumor. I like to speak in facts, but when I hear certain things, I do speak about them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all based on the water and controlling the land and the farming. And if you get rid of the people or displace the people, now you have the land. It seems like the next step, right? That's what they're doing in Maui.
It does. And from me bringing up this to the attention of everybody, now I understand Biden's going through all this stuff, with his criminal case. Yeah, he committed crimes. He violated, secret and security codes, and he violated certain other things under the classification laws of the United States. And he's not being held accountable for it. His kid is in violation of many laws, and he's not being held accountable for it. Austin is a sec def, was my boss was General Austin, and now he's in a hospital. He didn't bother telling anybody he's got this illness or how bad it was or anything. So you have a little bit of a turmoil going on in the White House, and then you have Kamala Harris, the vice president, coming out, screaming about Alexei's death in Russia, and she's going to take action, and that's, I'm going to be honest, that's laughable. That really is laughable for her to say anything.
Yeah.
I look at this like, this is the time for the Congress and Senate to act, to get their Armed Services Committee, Intelligence Committees on board to start taking actions and dictating to the White House, this is what has to happen. Because right now, nothing's happening.
Well,
we are not going down.
Let me ask you a question. Excuse me, I have it too. Do you think the generals and the people can be paid off?
Oh, I'm positive of that. Just look at General Flynn.
Yeah, Flynn's been in the news lately, and a lot of people are calling him out right now. We have a long-standing history of talking about Flynn and what he did to you and trying to silence you and basically bury your narrative of what he actually did to you. And now he's surfaced. But let's just segue just for a minute to remind viewers that you mentioned in one of these that Flynn was part of the team that created the whole Q movement. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Yes, back in 2018 and 19, this QAnon became apparent as like an online motivational conservative group of
With
well,
comms.
they talked about them in the media as being conservative group of nerds. That's what the media said, not me. So let's make that clear. And after a while, I told my wife, I said, that's General Flynn. That's retired General Flynn. And his brother, he's got 9 brothers. One of his brothers is an IT guru. And the QAnon started coming out more and more and more. But as of like 2019, they became so radical in their discussions online. Everybody distanced themselves from the Q. And I think it was their slogan was something like where one goes, we all go, or something like that. Anyways, whatever they used to say, but they were dimed out. Well, recently it came out that retired General Flynn is actually the head of QAnon. And they even likened some of his speeches and some of the QAnon rhetoric to devil worship and to, I forget what else it was, like trafficking or some garbage. But anyways, like I said, a lot of them are probably just normal people looking for a normal venue to move politics along in a better direction, and they get snookered by this.
Mm-hmm.
Can I give you an example? Do you have a second for an example?
Sure. Yeah, please.
Okay. So a long time ago, a psychological operations program was developed. We'll say that. A program was developed by the United States government, and the program looked promising. Cool. Well, when you go to apply it, it actually gets applied to digital applications, all right? Most of the countries we were in with didn't have internet or radios or TVs or other things, and even the ones that didn't get much on it.
Right.
So it was a shelved program, and when it was shelved, the private company that created the program sold it to other private companies, right?
Oh, wow.
So it now is used in advertising. So, for instance, you're on Facebook, let's say you were on Google yesterday and you typed in Prada purse. So now you're on Facebook and you get flooded with Prada ads. And then the next thing you know, you get emails regarding Prada. Well, that's part of that network. So you can see what the civilian applications are, like reinforcement to go buy your Prada. Spend $1,000 you don't have to get a purse you don't like anyways. And that's kind of what the whole deal was. Right. So a lot of people are claiming that this program today, like people that are coming out in interviews are all saying, oh my God, this is a program that's being used to manipulate the American public. And, oh my God, they're going to be, I guess sucking, soup through a vegetable straw because their brains are going to turn to mush. And if they don't do what people say to do and all this, well, that's absolute garbage and nonsense. This is nothing more than a program that is now being used for civilian applications to sell products, goods, and services. And these false narratives, these misdirections and intentional misleading of stories to change people's minds, saying I'm a conservative or I'm a liberal and follow my path, and their path turns out to be some kind of like circle, or some weird direction that doesn't really have anything to do with what you thought it was. And that's what people are doing. Taking away from the actual truth that's out there.
Well, it seems like a psyop on top of a psyop that's going on. But can you explain why Trump does not either champion or speak of Flynn?
Recently, Trump said something to the effect that he would bring Flynn back to the White House with him. I don't think that President Trump understands that I even warned his administration in 2018 that guy is going to be the downfall of the Trump administration. And after he was kicked out of office for lying, which was lawful, but he wasn't charged for lying, but he was kicked out, all of a sudden, Trump faced all kinds of impeachment articles, and every time he turned around, he was being told he had to have an attorney present. As a president, you don't need an attorney. You are the commander-in-chief. An attorney can't tell you, what decision to make. Just like he had that stupid argument with that reporter from CNN, Acosta. And Acosta took it to court and said, well, the judge said, you have to let me back in the White House. No, he doesn't. And there are laws on the books that show that he doesn't have to be let back in the White House, because if he's going to be combative with the president in a discussion, and, you know, here's Flynn doing all this stuff behind the scenes, and he really hurt Trump. And I don't know why that wasn't picked up on or known, but a lot of people in the White House, they knew about him. They knew about his bad behavior. They knew about what he had done. President Obama is the one that put him in charge of the Defense Intelligence Agency, and he supported, because he was a Democrat, he supported Obama 100%. But even Obama had to let him go and only allowed him to retire because of all the dirtiness he had done. You know, if he wasn't with a Russian spy in bed, committing adultery, which is a crime in the military, he was out there talking to, you know, Kislyak, the Russian ambassador, which is another crime because he didn't go through the FARA Office, Foreign Affairs Act. He didn't do any of that stuff. And then he's over there making interviews with Al Jazeera Network, and he had been monitored down in Dominican Republic on phones he knew were not secure, talking classified material. I mean, there's a whole litany of things he was under investigation for that he never got charged for. So, you know, he's the one that really put Trump down. And that's, you know, he didn't, I guess President Trump and his administration didn't want to listen to that, but, you know, you can see the results.
Well, so now let's circle back, because why I don't quite follow why people think Flynn is the answer. But people do seem to think he is an answer, and then there's a whole nother faction of people that see what you're saying. Where would he enter into a future at all, and for what purpose, especially with the crisis that's coming over the border? And let's say Russia or China do act on that southern border, then what? What does Flynn bring to the table?
Nothing. He's got no good tactical or strategic knowledge of how the border acts. General Battley knew 10 times as much as he did about the border. I mean, and you have a lot of, like, really smart guys that are in office right now that are not able to perform their duties because of this current administration at the border. Flynn would not be able to do anything. Matter of fact, that guy would be the first to cut a deal with Russia.
Why? Tell us from your experience why you feel Russia is such a threat. Because there's a lot of people that are very favorable to Putin, especially the QAnon people, saying he really knows what's going on. He's gold-backed. He's this. He's that. What do you know that you saw take place, or that gave you that sense that, yeah, this is not good? What is that?
Well, obviously, his aggression and his moving back into South and Central America. President Reagan spent his entire presidency, 8 years, 2 terms, in pushing the communists out of South and Central America to build those countries up and make them strong. And when he left office, President Bush Sr. continued that legacy. Yeah, I know about the Iran-Contra deal, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, it was, again, designed to keep communists out. And the reason the communists need to stay out is because they're hell-bent on domination. Putin is of that old school. That's what his old school guy, he wants to go back to the old Soviet Union, USSR, you know. And he is trying to take over country by country. And he's got an excuse that's, you know, being spread out about why he's able to do this stuff. But no one stops him because of the amount of nukes he has. That's what he's using. He uses his nukes as a backstop. So it's like, you know, hey, you assassinate me or you take me out, and we'll just launch 10,000 nukes. We'll destroy the world 10 times over. I mean, that's the fear factor that's put into that. But when he starts moving to the American hemisphere, South and Central America, threatening United States doorstep with all kinds of stuff, and has China, who's a really big aggressor right now, on his side, supposedly, with Iran that's destabilized the Middle East. And he's got people like Venezuela that have, with Maduro, taken and really destabilized most of South and part of Central America. Then he's got a lot of pull. We are right now looking at Ukraine as the proxy to fight Mother Russia, and it's not working. It's not working. I said before, President Zelensky should have sued for a peace deal and allowed Russia to have some of the Donbas and Donbass regions that are Russian speakers already, to stop his people from being slaughtered. He didn't do it. He's been using his blackmail over Biden with the Burisma scandal, that he could pull out the documents anytime he wants in order to get more and more weapons, more and more, you know, ammunition to keep going and going and going. And meanwhile, while Russia's losing in Ukraine, in the country of Russia, there's a lot of sabotage going on from the Russian citizens who are tired of the war, but it's not made any effect. But now that he's killed, Alexei, this is not, he's a martyr now. Now he's not a good guy. So anybody that winds up taking over Russia, if they can get Putin out of office, has to worry about China again. I keep going back to China wanting to come in the back door of Russia. So that's kind of how this whole,
how does China, excuse me, how does China factor into the whole Iran situation along with Russia, and how Maduro may be in concert? What's going on there?
China supplying arms and ammunition, weapons, aircraft, gunboats, all kinds of stuff to Iran as well, and missiles. And the Iranians are providing it to both Hezbollah and Hamas in both Lebanon and in the Gaza Strip and now in Rafah. It's right now, the Middle East is torn between the Sunnis, which are people like, President Sisi in Egypt, or the King of Jordan, or the Saudis, and the Shia, which are backed by Iran, which is, again, countries like Iraq that were mixed now are not. Now it's Shia dominant, and they're a landlocked country with Iran. So their influence is spreading and their destabilization is spreading, and the Sunnis are very fearful of this because they don't want that. Yemen is the classic example. In Yemen, the government is Sunni, and the Houthi rebels are Shia, and the Saudi government has been in an active conflict helping the Yemenis, Sunni government to fight against these Houthi rebels that are backed by Iran. And when the United States starts making deals with Iran, it just, spits in the face of everybody in the Middle East that's Sunni, and they want to know, why should we even think about helping you or even coming to your aid or selling you oil? You saw the classic examples of that. So,
right.
We really have a problem now where if you look at the world on a global scale, South and Central America are very destabilized and getting worse. The Middle East is completely destabilized, and that's not a good thing. And then you have Eastern Europe that's destabilizing. You have the war in Ukraine, but it's affecting Poland and the Czech Republic and Romania, and Uzbekistan, Tajikistan. All those areas are being affected by that conflict. And then you have with China, the ability to try to take over Taiwan and taking over all these islands that are unmanned islands in the South and Central Pacific areas, making overtures. And then, of course, no one, mentions North Korea, but they're launching missile after missile right in the sea, threatening between Japan and South Korea. So you really have a tinderbox going on. And when you have millions of refugees at our border that are not all Mexican, everybody's blaming Mexico, but most of them are non-Mexicans. 90% of them are non-Mexicans. Who the hell are these people, and how are they coming in, and where are they going? What are they doing? You had on Fox News even today, they were showing like 21 Chinese nationals trying to dump their documents in a brushway after they got caught by Border Patrol that was being shadowed by a reporter. So again, you really have to come back to reality. So whether Biden is mentally capable or not doesn't make a difference. The President of the United States or the White House has to take action to start slowing this, immigrant flow and to stop the madness in South and Central America. We must stop it. And he should be doing it with a coalition. There's a lot of South and Central American countries that want to jump onto a coalition. They've asked for it, and the United States has denied it. So is Canada. Now, I don't know what Trudeau does. I don't care. I don't like that guy. I don't like his country because of the way he treats his people and with the laws he's got. He could at least be supportive of the United States to stop this flow at the border, and he is not. Matter of fact, he wants to be an open, sanctuary type country, and I think that's ridiculous.
Well, if the world is a bit of territorial, like it's a territory instead of sort of hard lines at this point, which seems to be a new definition in time of what this world is really made up of. I think we're coming to a point in history where some of these borders may shift. Like you're saying, Maduro's over there trying to capture and annex some more, and Russia may be ready to take back what they think was theirs, and or go further, or China now wants to take over Russia. What benefit, how would it benefit China to take over Russia?
How would it benefit China?
Yeah, how would it benefit China? It's a totally different culture.
Okay, well, it would benefit China in two ways. Number one, expanding territories that they want to expand, and number two, to gain fuel, because Russia is full of like oil, and China doesn't have an ability to actually mass produce its own fuel. So they need oil, and that's landlocked country right there. I mean, I know that Putin and China have these joint military exercises, but again, you're looking at two people that don't always necessarily get along, you know. And we can't forget about Pakistan and India, you know, bordering each other, and India's problems with China. I mean, there's a whole lot of things that are going on. But I keep calling everyone's attention back to one person, and that's Nicolas Maduro. And the reason I keep harping on him is not like a pet peeve of mine. I'm not, you know, personally know this guy. I don't want to go after him in person, that kind of stuff. What it is what he's done to Venezuela and his representation down there between election frauds, death squads, and killing everybody, destabilizing. That's the one unifying link that's created this massive bubble down in South and Central America. To go down there and to course correct that would allow for the rest of the world to see, number one, there's strength in the United States and its coalition allies. Number two, to stabilize the South and Central American regions, taking tremendous pressure off these governments down there that are holding on by a thread. And number three, to stop this mass immigration flow to the United States. I mean, and there's other reasons that I've listed, but those are the real key listings of the reasons. Remember, he's trying to send troops to Russia to go fight in Ukraine for the Russian government. He's trying to help the Hamas and the Hezbollah guys against the IDF and go send troops to Iran even. You know, when you have one country that's doing all that and influenced his neighboring elections to get more communistic leftist type governments in office that crack down and kill their own civilians, you got a real problem. And that, you know, there's still a $5 million bounty on the guy's head. I think it's $15 million. My apologies. So again, you know, we're sitting here on the cusp where we could have neutralized him years ago. And then when I did my mandamus last year, even if the White House wanted to read it and say, oh, that would be a great thing for reelection. So Biden could even use it for his reelection, you know, attaboy, that I've stabilized, you know, the South and Central American regions with a small force. It would only take a small force.
Well, do you think that, down there. Do you think that Russia and China are in a full court press for the United States? And who could get the United States?
Absolutely. The weapons and the troops are for show and threat, and they probably won't be used. Their real weapon goes back to economics and the economy. That's their real weapon. That is the absolute number one killer of the United States, is the economy. It's just that simple. You know, the United States does badly, the market does badly. Our market does badly, world markets do badly. Who benefits from that? You know, and again, it would be our adversaries.
Well, do you think they'd actually stand up from within, or do you think that they would invade us straight on?
No, invading the United States would be crazy. I mean, that's like sending, you know, that's like sending a school kid that's in kindergarten and telling him to go take over a 4,000 person high school, you know, with a water gun. I mean, that would be ridiculous. That would just cost so much. They don't have that kind of, you know, firepower, manpower, or costs other than weapons of mass destruction. Other than that, they don't have the means to do it. And obviously, you know, if you hit the United States with a weapon of mass destruction, or many of them, you're going to be wiped out. I mean, that's our response. But that's why I say they're there for you know, threat and show, and to make strength for communists to reestablish ties in South and Central America. And they have done so. We have taken little to no action to do anything to fix that. And that has to be course corrected. You know, if President Biden decided today, he said, hey, I want my ambassador to the UN to grab a coalition together and let's do a police action against Venezuela. And they're going to take an armada of ships down there, of 20, 30 ships from all different countries to include the U.S. and say, hey, we're giving everybody 48 hours to get out of the country so we can come in and effectively arrest Maduro and his cronies. And one of his cronies is head of the Supreme Court, obviously his staff and his generals, and we're going to arrest him. And that would be the end of that. I mean, I don't think anybody would stop us from doing that. And I think if the Chinese or Russians wanted to make a stink about it, they wouldn't put their troops in harm's way unless they don't care, and they would do that. But they're not going to go after protecting Maduro on their own. So Maduro, in my assessment, Maduro would run. He would take whatever gold bullion's left, which is 30% of the country's gold bullion, and go to Russia with it. That's what he would do.
That's amazing. And what's interesting to me is that for all the years that we've grown up with hearing how the CIA operates and all the other country three-letter agencies and things, and their capability throughout the world over time, that they wouldn't, we wouldn't be able with our technology to just go and address that or handle that. There's obviously some kind of collusion going on to allow that. There's something greater at play, clearly. I mean,
well, obviously, what's greater at play deals with money and deals with economies and probably companies and corporations that affect political decision making, which is corrupt and illegal in a lot of countries. But, you know, who's going to do it? I mean, the Department of Justice here is not going to go investigate a company or a corporation for, you know, malfeasance along with the politicians that went along with it because they don't want to be, you know, going against the administration is kind of how I want to say it. I was trying to word it carefully. And I mean, that's the kind of thing that's been happening. So
when you were over there in the Middle East theater, what did you see about Saudi Arabia, and how does Saudi Arabia factor into everything you've just said?
Okay. Saudi Arabia, excuse me, is a harsh country to the outside eye. And I agree with some of the harshness is not warranted. However, Saudi Arabia, what they've done is they've provided the United States and a lot of the world with oil. And they provided us military bases, and they provided us support, and they provided us help. And we reciprocated with them, and they made a lot of money off us. That's true. But they were always considered what's called like an outside ally. In other words, an ally that we wouldn't want to use if we didn't have to. I mean, absolutely last possible option. We wouldn't want to use them because their main function in our eyes was the oil. Well, now with these Iran deals between Obama and Biden, now we have a problem with Saudi Arabia because they don't get along. They're in a proxy war like Russia is with Ukraine, where they're in a proxy war with Yemen, with the Houthi rebels and Iran. So none of the Sunni countries get along with any of the Shia countries, and Iran is trying to influence its dominance. You know, one of the other factors is President Erdogan out of Turkey. Now, this guy is not a good guy, but I'm telling you right now, the big thing about Turkey that we had problems with back in 2008 when I was in Iraq, I actually stopped it, was Turkey was trying to build a dam to dam up the Tigris River. That would have, you know, starved half of Iraq, both their agricultural and their people from having any water. What gives him the right to do that? You know, oh, it's in his country, so he can build a dam. No, he can't. When the river is made to flow through and provide actual needed water to everybody down there. You know, there's talk of that again, and that's another scary factor. But think about it like this. If there's one focal point that we could focus on as a country in the United States, and I know you have foreign listeners too, but as the United States or even other countries, one focal point to change this course that you see everyone going down, path of war, blah, 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 it would be to remove Maduro and to restabilize South and Central America. That would be your starting point, in my honest opinion. And Maria Machado already won the elections. If anybody's listening that wants to be supportive of real Venezuelan people and change, support Maria Machado. Do everything you can to make sure she doesn't get arrested or killed, and that she's able to take office when Maduro gets displaced. That's what I would say. And the reason I'm telling you that is because the United States has always been the anchor point for the world to stop aggression by bad guys. And that's the way we've touted it. Doesn't mean we're right all the time or perfect. Don't get me wrong. But for the most part, we try to do the right thing. Now, in order for us to be able to go abroad, overseas, and to do better and more, we have to stabilize our home front. To stabilize our home front, we have to stabilize South and Central America. And to go back to the beginning point, and the individual protagonist that did this was Maduro. And that's why I keep harping on that one guy. I know it sounds pathological, but it's not. It's just the facts they lay out. And if you look at them and analyze them yourself, look at any news outlet, news, anything, you can see this man has created this whole situation from 2017 till now. So President Trump failed to get him out, and now President Biden's failed to get him out. And he is a paramount threat. He is a clear and present danger to South and Central America, and allowing Russia, China, Iran, and even somewhere in some of those areas, Turkey and others, to come in, even Middle Eastern countries, to come into their countries. So now you have multinational bad guy forces aligning with other groups like terrorist groups and cartels, which are all prevalent throughout. So there is no checks and balances down there yet. But we can change that. And then people can put up their voice. They can help to, affect this change. I would love that.
Well, what do you see now happening with the people that are coming across the border? What is it that you've heard that's the latest regarding that? Because you were saying that, or they were saying there's a problem at MacDill. What's going on over there?
Well, there's some security issues with MacDill Air Force Base and other bases around the country too, and I don't want to describe that over the phone with your listeners right now, but what I'm saying is that those threats are pretty obvious to anybody if they have two eyes and two ears. But the thing is that even those threats at the lowest level, the tactical level, meaning that the smallest level, are not being addressed. So
Yes.
if we're not addressing even the most basic security needs for the smallest level, meaning one military base or one military base and area, how are we affecting anything overseas? It doesn't make any sense. It's like a contradiction.
Mm-hmm. Well, the people that have come in, they're being given money now. They're being given all kinds of sanctuary. In fact, I just spoke with a fellow the other day that is in Colorado, and that fellow said that Jefferson County is a sanctuary city, and Jefferson County has now closed upwards of 7 schools, and they are now going to house people there. That's because a lot of the parents have pulled their children from the schools, and so apparently now they're just in this mad dash to close schools.
And again, I go back to my fixing the executive branch interviews that I've explained this to you before. The executive branch sets the standard. Every agency you can think of in the federal government is under the executive branch. And part of their job is oversight. That oversight is supposed to ensure that states and governors and local officials don't abuse and misuse their authorities. You have a mayor and a couple of city council members that say, we're going to be a sanctuary city at the cost of all the Americans there and the American students there. That's illegal. You can't just say that because you're a temporary, elected official. That's not your charter, and that's not what the state laws or the federal laws allow for. So the oversight by the federal government is absolutely critical. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I would think that the ACLU and civil liberties are off the chain, because if I was a parent of a child going to that school, I would say that all my rights have been infringed upon based off of their decision to say, we're going to house illegal immigrants here as opposed to teaching my child and allowing my child to get the school meals. That is a civil liberties violation, and it goes against the Constitution, which is our highest law, Constitution, federal laws, and then military laws, and then it goes down to state laws. So, we have to go back to basics, and the basics are not being done, just like the economy. I mean, the economy is in a terrible state. Janet Yellen's not lowered any of the interest rates, and they should have been lowered. And there's no oversight on companies for gouging and price charging. And you have a credit card company, for example, if you had an 18.99% APR on that, and all of a sudden, as of last month, they jumped up to 29.99%. And they're doing it with impunity.
Right. Well, have you heard about the new state called Brooklyn? It's it's even got its own UN building in it. It's insane what's happening, actually, and the degree to which people are going along with this. You see, I've learned over time in doing these interviews that if you don't say anything, then you've basically complied. You said yes without saying, unless you say something. You can say, hold up, we need to discuss this, or file in on it, or do something. But to say nothing is the next step to compliance, and it then goes further. So with that said, um, people need to really start standing up again. I think they're tired though. Don't you think that people are, you know, like you can hear it in my voice, you have it in your voice. There's this thing that's going around, it kind of wipes you out for a while, plus all the politics of the world and all the craziness that's going on. Not to mention the more recent controversy of the Tucker Carlson interview with Putin and so on. There's there's just so much in the theater everywhere that people are trying to pay attention to. It's exhausting. And then in their own backyard, things are getting moved without anyone realizing the needle just moved. And then they just announce it like, here's what's happening now. And you have to accept this. You don't have to accept this.
That's what I'm saying. Let's just break it down so everybody understands. There's not all doom and gloom. Yeah, it looks that way, especially with the media being so irresponsible in their reporting. They report without facts, and they're not being held accountable. It used to be the FCC would come down and find a media outlet or find an individual that produced some kind of false narrative, and if that false narrative or it was like a lie, they would go ahead and charge them with criminal, charges when it goes to creating riots or violence or panic. That hasn't taken place in many years now, and that is again another effective issue of oversight that's not happening. However, when you are in either the United States or other countries, you have to understand that you can start somewhere with one major issue, and like my issue is Maduro, obviously, and supporting Maria Machado, who won election lawfully. You can go to a different type of route to continue to support it. The problem is a lot of people, they don't want to get involved, or they don't want to even get involved with, not saying not involved, but they don't even want to send like a message or an email to senator or congressman, or even in their own country, a parliament member or, the prime minister or whomever. They don't want to do this because they don't want to be identified. They don't want to have a backlash if what they say goes wrong. And the reality is that tyranny starts when you're afraid. That's where tyranny begins. When you're afraid to stand up and do or say what you're allowed to, that's tyranny. And tyranny equals compliance. Compliance equals unfairness and law violations that go unchecked. And that's not going to happen. If you look at what happened to Israel, such a small country, 1,200 people were massacred. Women, children, babies, old people, sick people, young people. For what? Being Jewish? I mean, that's why they were slaughtered like animals. And then to find out the United Nations and UNRWA have a building in the middle of the Gaza area that has a direct line tunnel so Hamas can get in and out quickly. They knew about the attacks. Who's holding them accountable? Right. These are crimes, not just crimes against individuals, but crimes against humanity. And crimes against humanity equals mass killings for no good reason. You have too many of them going on around the world and in everyone's own personal countries. People have to stand up and say, I'm done with the tyranny. Somebody's got to get up there and do something. Not because, they need a favor from me or they need money from me, because that's their job. And when people swear an oath, they're supposed to abide by their oath. Everyone's throwing the oath in the garbage. I won't. I'm not going to get tired. I'm going to die one day and maybe nothing will change. But at least I put out whatever I could put out to make a difference. And so people could change and do what they wanted to do as well to try to aid that effort in changing to make it better for their kids, their grandkids, and so on.
That's why I like having you on so much, because your continued effort is so spot on, and it has been all the way along. Now there's a faction of people that say, yeah, but you need to use it in the quantum and then you'll actually get something done with your motivation. And there's that. There's also the fact that lots of people can begin having a voice. I think everyone feels today in the world and also in media and social media that you can spout off behind your computer keyboard as an opinion but people seem to fail to get together in their actual city or township and say, we preserve our rights here. We preserve our, in fact, there was a recent lawsuit and article of the township I'm in currently, where the school district infringed upon a child and began to sway them to believe their gender identity. The mother finally yanked the child out of the school and sued the school for what happened there. And so they've kind of stepped back, but the encroachment on their mental health is a real serious issue. And so with that kind of thing where people are confused, let's take young people, they get influenced and they become confused. I'm not saying one side or the other. I'm just saying that when people like administrators take away the rights of the parent and then end up confusing an otherwise innocent child with identity, you have a lot of people that are numb from that point forward or traumatized, walking around in the world unable to make better decisions. And so that mother stood up and she said, hold it. And that became a lot of news. This is the kind of stuff that people need to realize and not sit down and go, gosh, that's terrible, and move to the next town, but actually stand up in their community, come together, and then take it from there, go further, go up the chain. There's quite a bit that people can do, but I don't think they're actually stepping out from behind their keyboard enough to do it. Now, the keyboard can be a strength because, like you said in the other interviews, people could take that and actually use it to reach out to people of influence, let's say. And I won't call them powerful because I don't know if they are any bit powerful, but they would have a voice. And so we need the people to take stance and have a voice. You're again coming back around to pointing out the most blinking light that's at our southern border, and then the players that support the blinking light. So Maduro is, in your opinion, someone that needs to be removed immediately, and Maria should be put in. Is that correct?
Yeah. The reason I keep going back to Maduro is if you go back to 2017, all the countries in South and Central America were operating somewhat normally. I'm not saying perfectly, but somewhat normally. And you come to 2024, 7 years later, now you look at South and Central America, and you have like 1/3 of them that have turned into communist, election fraud countries, espousing Russia, China, and Iran as allies, and storing strategic bombers that hold nukes and tactical nuclear weapons against the United States and other countries. And you have this migrant flow of well over 7 million people now, well over 7 million people. And by the time they get to the United States, or Mexico rather, and then to the United States, now you have like 25% of them that are not even Latin American. They're from, like I said, Africa, the Middle East, China, Russia. You wonder where this is going and how this continues to happen. Think about it. So if Maduro gets removed and Machado takes over, the United States can start removing Venezuela, sending them back home. And then some of the other South and Central American countries will get back on board. Probably President Silva de Lula out of Brazil will be relieved by the parliament, which they almost got him relieved, and they'll relieve the Supreme Court members that continue to vote for him, along with the companies that are paying those people off, you see. And then Brazil can start to stabilize. And then you can get Ecuador back under control and put Colombia back in good hands. And Cuba could become a more open country again, like it was when, I hate to say this, but when Obama was in office, they became somewhat more of an open country, which apparently they didn't like. But still, this kind of removal and stabilization will be the best venue and the best avenue we have to approach the American hemisphere. And from that, we can also project strength overseas to start to push back on adversaries that are harming people in other countries. And again, England is our strong ally, but again, their country has been inundated with a lot of the Middle Easterners, we'll just put it like that. And they have created a lot of problems, a lot of crime because of them. France has no-go zones, which I've never heard of that. But a no-go zone apparently is where they let a bunch of Muslims run a whole zone, a whole sector with no oversight or law enforcement. And then you had the beautiful church Notre Dame get burned down by a bunch of Arabs, and they wanted to play it off like it was an accident. Now, so I don't know what these leaders are doing. The country of Greece burned and nobody helped it. The country of Greece economy collapsed when the World Bank collected from them and nobody helped them. I mean, the Spanish government's having problems. You know, you can go around the world and see all these detrimental things that are going on. But if we don't start pushing back on things, you know, we have to try to reestablish control as regular citizens, saying this is not what I signed up for. This is not what I pay taxes for. This is not what I work for, you know. And obviously the COVID and the corona virus, the whole garbage thing that it was, and the problems and the panic it created, you know, yeah, it was a real virus and it still has its little teeth in people, but it wasn't a pandemic to the point of shutting down countries. I don't know why we had to go to that point, because, you know, the WHO, the World Health Organization, or the, you know, the CDC, run by people that actually helped create this virus, are the ones saying, oh, you got to lock down for 2 weeks and do this and that and the other. And nobody was issuing out the hydroxychloroquine or anything else. And magically in the United States, the two plants that manufacture hydroxychloroquine burned down within a week of each other.
Right.
So you have to go back and look at that. What was that for? Was it for a pandemic, or was it for government's assertion of control to say, we're going to shut everyone down and no one's going anywhere? And they effectively did that in every country around the world, thinking it's a safety measure, when in reality it's a control measure. And this is why we have to really look at that and take lessons from that. Our lessons learned from that were the governments were able to control and shut down our entire country. That can't be allowed to happen again. That cannot be allowed to happen again.
Well, it seems like they're inching that way. They want that to happen again. Everybody's talking about it, and they're talking about it like it's going to be a heroic effort by Trump to declare martial law and we'll all be shut down.
Well, no. Anytime you're in martial law, that's not heroic. You know, if you want to go to martial law down in downtown LA with the crime in certain sectors, or Chicago or other areas, you know, you can do martial law for a couple of days to gain the criminal element under control. But as far as martial law goes, you know, statewide, countrywide, citywide, no, you can't do that. You just can't do it. People can't function like that. And then the media being controlled or putting out its own narratives, which 90% of it's false. It's a wonder that they're allowed to get away with so much. But, you know, again, without the oversight, they're going to continue to get away with it. So they could say anything. They could say, hey, tomorrow the sky's going to be pink all day, 24/7. And people are going to be looking up all day long, wondering when the sky's going to turn pink. And meanwhile, they wasted an entire day doing that because the media lied. So they be example for big issues. And that's why the media has to have some kind of safeguards and controls, so they don't create panics or riots, so they don't give false narrative out or false medical information out, you know, during serious events.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I would like to just thank you again for being with us and for having you back here to share these updates with us, because it's always a pleasure to speak with you and to go into what's really going on in the world, and the more of how the world is setting up for the next steps. That's something you really are on point about all the time, and seeing that next step. And so I appreciate that so much in you, and thank you. And we'll have you back again to discuss some more. But is there any final comment that you'd like to make for people tonight?
No, absolutely. Just remember, the glass is half full. It's always going to be half full. You got to laugh at certain things and then draw strength from doing things. Once you take action, you feel satisfied. Take action, write your guys, write your congressmen, senators, do what you got to do. Just get involved and try to get your neighbors involved and your friends and family involved, and you'll wind up making a difference. I know I would keep saying that. I know that people have probably tried that, but you got to keep pounding, keep pressing. Don't give up.
Yeah, very good. Oh, I have one more question before we go. What do you think about the people that have dropped out of the race in the Republican Party?
Well, I think Governor DeSantis and Trump had an agreement from the start. I think it was meant to get nasty. You know, I think the others that dropped out of the race knew they didn't have a chance after, you know, certain things in certain states took place with how many people wanted them as a candidate. And I think that the messaging could have been better from some of these candidates on the Republican side. As far as the Democrat side goes, they're being stifled. I find that to be appalling because I don't think President Biden could do another term if he wins. I really don't. I think his physical health is going to go down and deteriorate. I'm tired of hearing the word acuity, mental acuity. I mean, everybody and their mom's using a medical term that's just repetitive and it's stupid, you know? It's all about his physical capabilities, and that's really where we're headed to in this next term if he becomes president again.
Oh, he can't. That's impossible. It just seems it's a totally impossible. It's an unlikelihood. He wouldn't. She would step in, or they'd try to have somebody else step in as a speaker or somebody. But we'll get into all the politics of things another day because I think the whole political thing is a sham anyway. And coming from some of the quantum side, I really feel it's a sham. I feel like the people are being duped by what's going on. It's not fair to the people that they're having narratives also waste their time when these narratives are just unlikely all the way around. So we'll get into that another day, but I want to say thank you, and we appreciate your point of view very much and all of the information that you share each time. So William Kotel, Sergeant William Kotel, he's a retired Army sergeant, and he's a former intelligence officer, and he worked at CENTCOM, and you can hear our interviews on Making Life Brighter on YouTube and also on Voice America on the archive. So thank you very much, and we will look forward to having you back again soon.
Thank you all very much. God bless.
So there you have it. Sergeant William Kotel, and the things that he says definitely have some merit. Each time that he's talked to me about things, those things have come to pass one way or another, and he's been really kind of centered. His focal point has been around Maduro the whole time, and I got to see some of the pictures of the slaughterhouses he was talking about. It was pretty horrific. It's hard to believe. I mean, it's not really even something to put out on air because it's so gross, but it's true. What's happening down there has been just barbarian. And I think he's in a position where he's pointing out the entire South American theater and the characters that are, attempting to hold false power all the while people are needing assistance or needing further help, and they're not getting that help. And yet then we have the Russians coming in and China coming in. It's definitely a setup. And if you guys remember Kim Clement, I touched on that back in 2019 before all this other stuff was really popular, and pulled forward and put out there the prophecy of Kim Clement. And was it actually Russell J. Gould that was the man of gold, not Trump? And in that prophecy, Kim Clement talks about there will be a country that invades suddenly, and then this one man stands up from within. And, some people will say, oh, that's just a prophecy. It's not going to happen. Others say that, in fact, that's Trump coming in. He's the rightful king. He's going to be the guy that divides between China, Russia, and whatever. And I have heard that too, as well. There was an interview that I listened to a couple of years ago. I actually even posted it on Making Life Brighter on Facebook. And I brought everyone's attention to that interview. And that was talking about somebody with insider information that said the future will be a division of this world between Russia, China, and Trump having hold of certain countries as well. And that was at the time that they were they were saying that was the predicted outcome and already agreed upon outcome somewhere along the way. Now, that gets a little trippy, and I'm not going to go down that trail at this moment. But what I'm telling you is that these narratives, like William was talking about, get legs with psychological operations. And those legs, if they don't take hold within say, the proposed plan, then they get sold off to another party, and then those legs end up having a continued effect through private parties, and that then affects the public. So we're going to see where this all comes to and plays out. But as always, he has great insight into what's going on in the Middle East, and if you heard him say that he was responsible for not letting Iraq experience the drought based on a dam out of Turkey. So he's really had a hand over time in trying to help fairness be true fairness across the world. And that's something that I think people should take note on, because he's actually really been a champion. I mean, his filings immediately about the withdrawal from Afghanistan were tremendous. And those filings were the first of them. He did it, not somebody else. Sergeant Kotel did that. And they tried to, step away from being responsible to those filings at the time. But he was very much calling out before anyone else that the withdrawal was not only unlawful, but no one leaves all their assets behind like that. So it's a setup. And that's obvious. Now, in hindsight, we can see that, but he was ahead of the curve. Again, he's been ahead of the curve, and he's taken that mandamus. He's taken his filings, despite them being in fiction, he's taken his filings and put them out there front and center and taken the time to do it. So the world needs to turn upside down, perhaps, to get right side up. But either way, here's a man that's helping the world try and see, hey, here's what's happening. Here's what's happening behind the scenes. Stand up in your community, stand up among your people, write to people, do what you can do to sound the alarm and make some change. And there is something that we have learned, by the way, since he told me that the pandemic was coming. He was so on the mark for that in advance. I actually called my own mother and said, you have X amount of hours before this is going to happen. And in fact, that happened. He definitely was in front of all that. So he was sounding the alarm then, and he's been very much on point all the way along. I'd like you to realize that these positions we find ourselves in may seem fixed. And I think there's a huge faction of people out there that want a fixed outcome so they can justify their position of where they stand. And I'd like to just say for the record that wouldn't it be nice that we have a better outcome, even beyond what people are trying to say is a fixed outcome? Maybe, if, for example, if we all sat down, this is just an example, and it's mine. We all sat down and meditated for, let's say, 3 days straight, all people across the world, kind of like after 9/11, the world got quiet and humble periodically. Then it went back to its same overreach. If we did that, we would have the 100th monkey effect and tip the scale toward change. And that change can be exponential and it can be very quick. Same with the realization of what's going on around you. What I was about to say is that during the pandemic, when the quote unquote illegal mandates, and a mandate is not a law, when the mandates came down for different things and people stood up against those mandates and said, I'm not doing this or I'm not doing that, eventually they realized, wow, they can actually stand their ground and hold that because nobody has true power over that. There's no jurisdiction, there's no law there. That's not really, and frankly, for the real truth behind everything, the Title IV flag is what sets the law now. And that Title IV flag is the only thing that you can base law on, even into dimensional fields beyond the Earth plane. So on that note, I'm going to leave you with some great food for thought, and go jolly. Thank you for listening. Please share, and I will be back with more And I've had lots of opinions lately. I just haven't had much of a voice, literally, physical voice. So uh, we have a lot happening in our world, and it's getting kind of dicey, but I'm going to remind you to keep the light, and more importantly, go make somebody else's life brighter and go jolly. Thank you.